viewers, and welcome once again to another of our literary program. Today we are very delighted to have in our midst a writer, an author, a poet, and above all, she is also currently teaching in the Department of English of the Northeastern Hill University. Yes, we have Dr. Preetinich Barman. Well, Dr. Preetinich Barman, as I said, she writes poems. In fact, recently, this year itself, she released a book, a collection of her poems, which is called My Body Floating with Hyacinth. Besides that, she's also written in the Rajbangshi language, from where she belongs to, of course. And sometimes her poems have also found, in fact, they are part of the syllabus of some of the universities, both in Assam as well as in West Bengal. Her poems have also been published in many anthologies, in magazines and journals, etc. And well, she continues to write, devote herself. Besides her academic career, she also finds time to writing. I am sure that this conversation that I'm going to have with her will be an interesting one. So join us and be with us as I right now introduce you to Dr. Preetinich Barman. Hi there, Dr. Preeti. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine.
And warm welcome to you to Doordarshan Shillong. It's a pleasure to have you. And well, you have recently joined the Department of English in the Northeastern University.
Yes.
How is it different from college teaching to the university level?
Well, it's quite different, but then at the same time it's almost similar.
Okay.
Similar in the sense that there I was a teacher at college, and at the university also I'm a teacher. So I have to connect to my students. That is the basic essence of my teaching. It's different in the sense that earlier I used to teach at the UG level. Now I teach at the MA level.
Right,
the
at
PG
the postgraduate level.
Yes. And so the preparations are more rigorous, and since it's a new syllabus for me, so I have to go through again and again, prepare my class. I mean, earlier also I used to prepare, of course, but then here I have to devote much more time. So that is what it is. And then the critical perspective,
yes,
I have to use much more here at the PG level.
Absolutely. And talking about, you know, your devotion to teaching, you have always enjoyed academics, haven't you? Because you have a string of qualification. Yeah, I mean, so you are always into, you know, books, into writings, into academics, into learning. Were you always devoted to that? I mean, did teaching always interest you? Did studying always interest you?
I will start with studying. When I was a child, I was a keen reader.
Okay.
My parents used to buy books for me, and then my uncles and aunts also used to gift me books.
Okay.
And I used to read those books, story books and magazines, not just once, twice, thrice, even 4 times I used to read. I used to love to explore more and more. And each book was a new journey, and the worlds that they unfurled were so unfamiliar at that point of time. So I was mesmerized by the books. I have read the Odyssey when I was in class 8. And then other books had also influenced me, like Meskim Gorky's Mother. Now before that, Alice in Wonderland, Little Prince, the Ramayanas, the Arabian Nights. Those were the books that were so intimately connected to my heart that maybe those had shaped my
thinking.
Yes,
right?
thinking,
early
and
thinking.
also the critical reading that I got involved when I was doing my honors, English honors. Now English honors gave me a chance to read more and more books, and also the theory books that I had to read then, those had shaped my thinking. And then when I was in PG at Guwahati University, so I was very much delighted and even privileged. I felt privileged to listen to my professors, and I always wanted to imitate them. Of course, I was naive at the time, but then the seeds of critical reading were sown then, which later developed while I did my MPhil and then my PhD.
Absolutely. As I said, you have a string of qualifications, educational qualifications. There's nothing that you have not done so far, right? And you've sat for civil services also often. You have cleared those also, right?
Yes.
But then you stuck to teaching.
Yes.
That was your calling, you felt?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, civil service was fine, but then I worked there for 3 years. After that, not after that, while I was working, then also I felt that I should rather be in academics, because during those days also I was pursuing my PhD. So I was interested more in reading and in academics than in administrative works.
Okay. And what you said just now pointed out, it is so crucial, so important that in our childhood days, if I also remember correctly, during our birthdays and other celebrations, we were always gifted with books. Right?
Yeah.
And we used to look forward to those books that we used to get.
Yes.
Times have changed. Nowadays, little children are given guns and other, other kind of toys. Which I think doesn't really open up the vast spectrum of knowledge and bring in a sense of interest into learning. Would you say that?
Yes, definitely. I have noticed. I also have children, so I have noticed that they are more towards seeing everything in YouTube. So animes they watch, and then they get interested in those, but I always had preferred books. And had I been a child, even now, I would have preferred books, because that gives you the scope for imagining things.
Absolutely, and that is so important, isn't it? Because we used to go to our wonderlands literally, and we used to get transported to those lands, imagine, and we lived in our own imaginary world, a self-created imaginary world.
True.
And I think many of those imaginations that you may have imagined then through your writings and through your, the influences of your teachers, etc., found expression later when you started writing. So when did writing begin for you?
Well, if you ask when did writing begin for you, I will date back to long past when I was in class 3.
Okay.
I used to compose small poems, basically rhymes, on butterflies, flowers, and so on.
Okay.
My mother used to inspire me, and when I was just in class 5, she got one of my poems published.
Okay.
So that was the first time that I got publication, though in a limited way, but I was very happy. Now she had a friend, Kasima Khatun, who herself used to write Assamese poems.
Okay.
Now she wrote some novels also. She used to take me for conferences, and there sometimes I used to recite my poems. Rhymes basically, but then that was the kind of exposure that I got quite early in my life. And I really feel grateful. In fact, in my acknowledgement to the book, My Body Floating with Hyacinths, I have mentioned both of them.
Absolutely. And so when did serious writing, because you've done some critical writings also, I can see one critical writing that you did on Orhan Pamuk also, right? Critical reading, and you have others also. So when did serious kind of writing in both the languages begin for you? English as well as in the Rajbangshi language?
That was during the time I was doing my PhD. I was a researcher, so I was engrossed in my research. Now, when I started reading Pamuk, then the first book itself had induced me the inspiration to read more of Pamuk. And the first book was, of course, My Name is Red, and I just liked the book at the first sight. After that, I read other books of Pamuk, and somehow I could relate to Pamuk in the sense that he writes about identity of a nation, and then the peripheral identity that a city can assume. So I could connect very much with his writings, and I took up research on his books.
Now, why do you say you related to that?
Yes, well, basically I'm from Gauripur, which is a town in Assam that borders Bengal. So it's in Assam, but at the same time it's very near to Bengal, and it assumes a hybrid identity.
Right.
Once Gauripur happens to be the capital of a princely state, So I could relate to Pamuk because he basically talks about Istanbul. From multiple perspectives, he looks at the city of Istanbul. Now, the city of Istanbul has a very long history. Earlier, it was called Byzantium, then Constantinople, when it was the capital of the Roman Empire, and then Istanbul, after it was conquered by the Ottoman Turks. But then, when Turkey became a nation state, then the capital was shifted to Ankara. So, Istanbul has that sense of loss that I can relate to.
Well, Preeti, you know what you said just now, you narrated about history, it is so familiar, right? Because that's what I do too in the classroom. But coming back once again to your writings, what are the other writings that you've also done?
Okay.
Yeah.
Poetry is one that you know.
Yeah.
That I have been composing poems, and I have published 2 books of poems. One is My Body Floating with Hyacinths from Red River. Another is Ayur Poetic, that is written in Rajbangshi language, published from Coach Rajbangshi Sahitya Sabha, Assam.
Right.
And then I also write critical essays. Critical essays mostly on the writers of the Northeast, and also writings on culture studies, especially around Rajbangshi culture. So this is one of my highlights, that I like to write and research on Rajbangshi culture.
Okay.
Now, I have published some articles, some research papers in journals, both online and offline, as well as I have contributed some book chapters. Now, I will like to mention just 2 of those. One is Kushan Gan, a retelling of the Ramayana, that is published in a volume that got published from Springer. And then it's circulated worldwide because it's from Springer.
Right.
And I would like to say that while I write that, then I had to go for interviews. I took interviews of the Kushanis, Kushanis or Gidals as they are called, who actually are the actor, director, and also the producer of the team of Kushanis. So I had interviewed them. Then I wrote this article, and I have compared with the other versions of the Ramayanas.
Okay.
Now, in the book list of the Ramayanas, this comes in graffiti. My biblio comes. Another work that I would like to mention is called The Dancers and the Dance, that is on the indigenous dance performance during the festival of Hudumdev. Now, Hudumdev is a folk deity, and the performance is around the cult of Hudumdev. And this performance includes not just dance, but also mimes, and then short plays, as well as songs.
So what I understand so far, that culture beckons you, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're drawn towards it, and so you unravel it, you do some research, and then you go about. It just doesn't happen like that, because a lot of research also goes into what you're writing.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, because you have to be very sure what you're writing is authentic.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then coming back to this book of poems that you have, I mean, this year it said we have released, right?
Yes.
My Body Floating with Hyacinths. Yeah, I mean, the cover looks beautiful with hyacinths, etc. But why have you, the title, why is it so?
Yeah, I was asked the same questions a couple of months ago.
Okay.
Well, I was interviewed by Vasudhara Roy.
Okay.
She also had asked, why hyacinths particularly?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is a recurring imagery that comes on and off to my mind. Hyacinths, and I really feel floating with hyacinths.
And we see it quite often, right? Around in Assam we find, yeah.
Yes, maybe because I'm from a place which is surrounded by water bodies where hyacinths bloom in profusion. Maybe because I was enchanted by the portrait of Ophelia, that is from Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, who drowned along with the hyacinths.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe also because I consider myself to be floating with a flower as peripheral as the hyacinths. So this has to do with my peripheral identity, but I still strive to bloom.
I like it, you know, because my body, that means you yourself find yourself in that situation.
Yes.
So we will continue this conversation, but how about reading for us one such poem that you have, kind of included in this book of yours?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This book is divided into 4 sections. The first section is called "You May Not Believe My Story."
Okay.
Now, this section contains poems that move around my memories of my ancestral home.
Okay.
So I will read one of the poems. It's called "My Old Story." One day I will tell you my old story, and the ghost of my giant ancestors would leap up the ancient well. You will hear the evening prayers of my great grandmother emerge from the dilapidated temple, harmonizing with the medley of the thunderous drum, the forceful cymbals, and the high-pitched conch. You would wonder how these have made carvings in the passages which border the half-asleep walls of the abashed mansion. Gushing up through the pages of my stories, they would all stare at you and your lustrous novelty. You may not believe my story, for you don't believe in ghosts. But if you visit the narrowing scraps of a yard, you will see the marks of a vanished well and a crumbled cattle shed. The neighboring night jasmine tree still carries its ancient fragrance.
So these are real imageries from your childhood?
Yes,
Yeah?
very much.
Okay, so your childhood finds a lot of reflection.
Yes.
So but you also write in the Rajbangshi language. Yeah. What are the kind of works you have written in the Rajbangshi language?
In the Rajbangshi language, I have basically written poems. Then some critical works also I have contributed in the same language.
Okay.
But then critical works are more on Rajbangshi culture, written in English. Then I have written directly in Rajbangshi. But this book of poem is written in Rajbangshi. Now, Rajbangshi poetry is coming up very well. And poets from Lower Assam are writing, as well as poets from North Bengal.
Have you done any translation work by any chance?
Yes, some translation works I have done and published also. I have published stories, folk stories from Rajbangshi to English, and also short stories from Rajbangshi to English.
But can you keep the same essence when you do the translation? Is it possible to keep it as pristine as it is?
Essence I try to keep.
Okay.
But then when you translate, you also have to see that the language of the original is not reflected. So there we have to be very cautious while translating. So that is what I strive to do. I try my best, and then the translations come.
Okay. But then, as I said, that you are also involved into teaching, serious kind of teaching now at the PG level, where you yourself have to do a lot of studies, prepare, as you say, for classes, etc. So when do you find the time really to devote to yourself and to your love for writing?
Well, when I compose my poems, then it has to be absolute solitude. But then when I absorb the elements of my poetry, the imagery, then I might be in a crowd. I might be in some meetings or in some social gatherings with family, friends, acquaintances. But then I gather the imagery. So often my friends ask, sometimes I zone out. So they ask, what happens to you? Where are you? Then I usually don't have a ready-made answer to them. But then how can I tell them that I myself is not just one? I feel plural, dwelling at the same time but in multiple spaces. So what imagery I restore during those moments, I recollect during my solitude and pour down those in the form of imagery to give the shape to my poems.
So what inspires you really?
What inspires me to write my poems is basically my connection to my native land. And then I also have written poems on the passions, trials and tribulations of love. So all this gives me inspiration. And about my native land, I have already spoken that I belong to Gauripur. So whenever I am somewhere else, like most of the times I am in Shillong, because basically I work at Shillong, I miss my place. So when suppose I am inside the quilt in Shillong or under the cloudy sky, I remember the vibrant sunshine of Gauripur. So that gets released. I feel restless, and then that gets satiated when I can write my poems. Then only I feel a bit of relaxation.
Okay, you calm down.
Yes.
Till such time there's a lot of turmoil going inside you.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So what kind of a person you are? Thinking person, should I say?
I might be a thinking person, but at the same time I'm extrovert also. So I cannot deny that I'm not at all introvert, but at the same time I cannot also deny that I'm an extrovert, because I socialize.
Right. So coming back to your book of poems again, can we hear you once again read something else? I mean, last time what you read was associated with your childhood.
Yeah.
You said this book is divided into 4 sections.
Four
so
sections.
if you can read for us something else from another
Okay.
such section.
All right.
Yeah. And incidentally, what kind of sections have you segmented these?
The first section, as I have already mentioned, is You May Not Believe My Story.
Okay.
The second section is We Had Emerged Out of Chaos.
Okay.
The third section is called Let the River Narrate Her Own Tale. Now this section is a kind of section where the imagery of the poem directly connect to the readers.
Okay.
So it's not just my response to the outside world, but then how the images themselves shape the views of the onlookers.
Okay. Okay.
And then the last part is My Body Floating with Hyacinths.
Okay.
So I would just like to read from this section, Let the River Narrate Her Own Tale.
You have to mention us also which is the river you're talking about.
It's not just a particular river,
okay.
but then it may be Godadhar
Okay.
that flows by Gauripur, or maybe the Brahmaputra, because the Godadhar connects to the Brahmaputra. The poem is called Red. Eagles soaring, swooping, surround my thought. A tight, limpid grip clot my essence into a ball of amor. Sky stares, stars freeze, sharp-eyed Amazons claw at my dreams, and I dream of red. An eagle flies alone, my eagles, red-eyed, red-wombed, charge in convocation, flinging heart flakes of light euphoria.
What are you trying to express in this? Why is it called red?
As I have said that the poems in this section directly connect to the readers. So it is you to decide. Now you are the audience, since you have heard this, that what does this red mean? So
it could
how
mean
connects.
multiple things to multiple people.
Yes.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting. You know,
Thank you.
Preetinich, it's such a pleasure speaking to you, and I can see a huge many number of books. But what are you right now devoting yourself? Because you're also working in some other projects that you have in mind to complete in the near future.
Yes. One such project is that I am going to bring out a book on Koch Rajbangshi culture.
Okay.
So I am devoting my time to that, and I have almost written the whole manuscript, so I am just editing those. Then at the same time, I am also working on a translation of Rajbangshi folk tales.
Okay.
So for that I am keeping time separately. There I cannot work much because I am basically devoted to this book, but then also I am devoting some time I am managing and doing that. Then poetry comes naturally to me.
Because
can't help
that's your love, I think. That's
Yeah.
your first love, what I can understand. Because you are a devoted mother,
Yeah.
you're a career woman, right? You are a wife also, and that is also quite a responsible, job that we need to do, right? And in the midst of all of that, you're also into so much of writing. I mean, hats off to you really to find so much of time for yourself and producing so much of wonderful works that you will, I'm sure, in the near future carry forward and scale much higher than what you are doing right now. All the best to all of your writings. It's a pleasure to have you in the studios of Doordarshan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you once again.
Thank you,
Doordarshan.
All right, so dear viewers, that was Dr. Preetinich Barman, a very deep thinker, somebody who as I saw her while she was reading, she's actually gone to a different world, and I had to bring her back again to the present. So that's also, I think, in a way, and the essence of a writer. A writer has their own little space, their own little world. Sometimes we really cannot go into it, but then we tried to at this particular moment with her. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Preetinich Barman. Until next time, with another edition of our literary program, it's goodbye.